vigilance, the action or state of keeping careful watch, standing guard, defending the bulwark between the righteous and the godless. Welcome, everyone. John Adams said, and I wholeheartedly agree, quote, "There is nothing which I dread so much as a division of the republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leader, and concerting measures in opposition to each other. This, in my humble apprehension, is to be dreaded as the greatest political evil under the Constitution." Unquote. I cannot agree more. This is the state of our nation, of our country, of our state, even at the county levels. This is the reality of what we are facing now. Two great parties, each equally corrupt, each equally divisive, each equally selfish, self-centered, and self-gratifying, and each equally evil and destructive to our nation. Today we're going to be talking about the Republican Party in Idaho. And I would like you to consider this as you listen to the evidence that will be presented here. Most of us have for many, many years gone to the polls, not having done our homework, not having researched the men and women who are on the ballot, not having an understanding of the issues, and most specifically, having no concept of what the Constitution says or means or how it's to be implemented in our lives. So here in Idaho, we arrive at the polls. We go down through the list of candidates, and with each list, the primary thing we do is we look to see which one has an R by his name. And if he has an R by his name, he gets our vote. And then we go home feeling like we have done our duty as citizens. I want you to think about that as we go through the evidence today. Because the simple fact of the matter is, if that is how you are voting, you are an enemy to liberty, to freedom, to the Constitution, to your friends and neighbors, to your children and grandchildren. You are bad. You are wrong. You must change. And until you do, we will never, ever restore our nation to what it was meant to be. Freedom is not free, but I can help. I offer a set of fundraisers that include advanced firearms training, defensive law seminars, Constitution workshops with a focus on the local solution. Now, why the local solution? It's simple. Government of, for, and by the people must always be close to the people. Hey, give me a call, 208-317-9843. Let's talk freedom. I'm going to start by sharing an experience that I had with our corrupt Republican Party. And then I'm going to share experiences from two others from opposite ends of the state. I would like to take you back almost 2 years. The primary elections had just ended. In these elections, I ran in two races, one for the legislature against Representative Kelly Packer, and I lost. And my second race was for the position of precinct committeeman right here in Power County. I won that one. According to state rules, we have a fixed number of days following the primary election to get together and reorganize our county central committees, elect new chairmen and vice chairs, etc. And so this meeting was scheduled and I arrived. Now, the party, sadly, the Republican Party is actually two separate parties anymore. We have on one side the establishment, Rhino, the old guard GOP, and these people are exactly what John Adams was talking about when he talks about the parties thinking that they are all and everything, putting themselves above the Constitution, above the people, above right. And on the other side of the GOP, we have what I would call constitutional Republicans. These are the Tea Party, the Republican Liberty Caucus, and many other groups who are desperately trying to get our government back to its basic founding principles of truth and liberty that can be found in the Constitution. So anyway, we showed up at this reorganization meeting. During the election, 4 precinct committeemen were elected. Now there are 6 precincts in Power County, so 4 of them were filled and 2 remained vacant. Anyway, of the 4 who were elected, 3 of the precinct committeemen showed up, and it was their duty to vote for the new leadership to bring the party into the next 2 years. You can almost see the panic in the eyes of the old guard unconstitutional Republicans, because 2 of the precinct committeemen, myself and Leanne Bolgan, were on the side of the Constitution, and only 1 of the attending precinct committeemen was opposed to the Constitution. Now, he's a good man, and I don't believe he's actually opposed to the Constitution, but he is ignorant and unaware, and so he follows the lead. They tell him what to think, he thinks it. They tell him what to say, he says it. They tell him how to vote, and he votes it. But the problem they had was they looked around and they saw, any voting that occurs today, we will lose, because the voting will be 2 constitutional against 1 establishment. They said, we don't have a quorum, we can't vote, we're going to have to reschedule. Well, the rules, the bylaws, state that 51% of precinct committeemen need to be there. Now, we had 4 that were seated, 3 were there, that's 75%, that is a quorum. They said, no. It has to be 51% of the precincts represented. Well, I want you to think about the ridiculousness of that argument. What if I hadn't run? What if I had not run, or what if any one of the other precinct committeemen had not run? We would have only had 3 seated precinct committeemen. Only 3. Now, with only 3, according to their interpretation, no business could be done. The other precincts couldn't be seated. The delegates couldn't be sent to the convention. Just a number of things could not occur. In other words, if there had only been 3 seated, they would have been forced for the next 2 years to do no business at all. They couldn't do anything. And not only that, they couldn't even vote to change the stupid bylaws, to allow them to do business. They would simply be hamstrung for 2 full years. There's no way that bylaw ever meant that. There's no way that bylaw would ever be written in anticipation of hamstringing the party for 2 full years. So anyway, my contention was that we had a quorum at the first meeting. We should have voted. And if we had done that, the leadership in Power County would be very, very different today. The leadership in Power County would be focused on constitutional principle, on educating the people. And instead we have the old guard who are focused on doing nothing at all other than defending their position just to make sure they don't lose power. This is a little bit, it reminds me of when I was in the Army. I was a helicopter crew chief, and we had to go out and do our gunnery school every year. So we were playing with missiles and machine guns and having a great time. Well, we always went out with, a lot of ammunition. And when it was done, when every pilot and every crew chief and every door gunner had met their qualifications, we still had cases of missiles and cases of belt-fed M60 ammo. Well, if we turn it back in, we won't get as much next year. And so we would fly out over the range with cases of ammunition and kick it out the doors of the helicopters and drop it there on the range, wasting thousands, maybe millions over time, maybe billions over time of taxpayer dollars. It's stupid. We're so worried that we wouldn't have ammo to kick out the door next year that we made sure to kick it out the door this year so we could justify having ammo to kick out the door. Does that make any sense to anybody? Well, the establishment GOP is very similar to this, in my opinion. They don't want to lose the power that they never use. And so they will fight and oppose anybody that challenges that authority, that power, so that they can have the power next year, which they won't use. They won't have any classes. They won't have any education. They won't have anything. They will simply do nothing. And in truth, most of the time they don't get anything accomplished other than having their picnic. So anyway, bottom line is we had the quorum. They said no quorum. They rescheduled the meeting, and at that meeting they made sure that they had both of their old guard precinct committeemen there. And so the problem we had at that point is that every vote ended in a tie. There were 2 ties for the Constitution and 2 ties for corrupt power. 2 votes for the Constitution and 2 votes for corrupt power. Well, this was no good, so they said, well, let's vote to seat our new precinct committeeman. At that time, the constitutional precinct committeeman, myself and Leon Bolg, and we said, no, we cannot vote for that today because, number one, we are not supposed to vote for our new president with hand-picked precinct committeemen. The precinct committeemen that the people put into office are the precinct committeemen that are supposed to vote for the new leadership. Doesn't that make sense? It's a representative government. If the representatives that you appointed don't choose the leadership, then the representative government is gone. And if the people that choose the new leadership are those that are handpicked by the people who want to be in the new leadership, then representative government is gone. So we said, no, we have to vote. We have to settle this first. The president or the chairman, vice chair, our delegates, they need to be appointed by the people who were appointed by the people. Well, they said no. They said, we're going to vote. We're going to fill those 2 empty positions. Well, we said, you can't, because your own bylaws require that you give public notice before doing so. There has been no public notice. It's not on the agenda. We cannot vote for precinct committeemen today. They said, we're going to do it anyway. And over the objections of the constitutional side, they moved forward. Now, this was really a miscarriage of justice, of liberty. You see, because there was no public notice and because there was no item on the agenda for this, the constitutional people that were in that meeting had no way to prepare and bring people in to run for those positions. And so we sat there and we said, we can't vote today. We haven't been informed. We don't have candidates. There's nothing we can do. They said, well, we've got our candidates. We're putting them in. So they put them in against our objections. Then they voted for them. Well, we refused to vote. We said, no, we will not participate in this because it is against the law and it is against our bylaws. They said, tough. They voted. They seated their hand-picked people in those new positions. And then those hand-picked people voted for and appointed the Republican leaders in Power County. The crazy thing is, through all of this, the people that you, the voters, put into office to do this job were silenced. We had no say. So I filed a grievance. And when the establishment folks saw what the grievance was, they said, uh-oh. They didn't even send their delegates to the state convention. Now, why wouldn't they do that? Because they knew they would be unseated, because they knew that they were illegally elected. And sure enough, at the convention, the grievance was reviewed, and the delegates from Power County were unseated. The decision had been made that they were illegally and against GOP rules elected. So they were unseated. Now, the decision was made that they would only at the convention make decisions pertaining to the delegates because, there's just a lot of business to do at the convention. And because at that point it's only the delegates that can vote in any convention issues. So they handled only the delegates and found that the Power County Central Committee had violated rules and election law. So after that, immediately after that, Barry Peterson, the chairman of the state GOP, lost his position, and it went to Steve Yates. Now, Steve Yates took no action on the balance of the grievance, none at all. In fact, he claimed after several months of inaction that my grievance had been lost. That wasn't his fault. So I resent the grievance. For over a year, I called and contacted, or attempted to contact, Stephen Yates again and again and again. He never once returned a call. He never once returned an email. He never once took my calls. On occasion, I got his loyal minion, Dave Johnston. And when I asked Dave Johnston, are you guys going to make a decision on my grievance? Are you going to make a ruling? The only answer I ever got, month after month, phone call after phone call, was, what good will it do now? Well, I don't know. What good will it ever do to expose corruption? What good will it ever do to do the right thing? Well, it made no sense to him, but I continued to push. I pushed and I pushed and I pushed and I pushed through every avenue that I could, and finally I got an answer. And in that answer, Steve Yates said that no rules were violated. And he said that he made that decision after giving opportunity for the affected parties to be heard. Now, I'm not going to go into his whole answer and argue it. I just want to answer this one point. He made his decision after the affected parties had been heard. Really? Leanne Bolgan was never contacted. Leanne Bolgan was never questioned. Leanne Bolgan knows nothing of these proceedings. Steve Yates never took my call. He never returned my call. He never answered an email. He never asked me a question. Steve Yates made a decision after hearing the opinions and the lies of the establishment GOP. That's it. That's all. Nothing more. So now in closing, I would like to remind you as you go to the polls. Be informed. R means repulsive. R means repugnant. R does not mean Republican. D means damn repulsive and damn repugnant. Now, somewhere in the mix on those ballots, there are good men and good women who deserve your support, who have earned your support, and who will be honest and dedicated and do the right thing. Party affiliation has not much to do with anything. The Republicans are corrupt. The Democrats are corrupt. Party is not the issue. If you vote along party lines, you violate the very principles of liberty. I would ask you to do more, be more, stand up as Americans. I'm Lance Earle. I'll see you soon.